Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week about media. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Alex, what do we have?
First question this morning is coming from Harold Williams in Portsmouth. When I started streaming, there was RTMP, then HLS came along. Now there are WHEP, QUIC, RIST, and ZIXI. What is better to use one protocol over another?
A lot of it depends on whether you're talking about delivery or whether you're talking about contribution. So, and there's contribution to a larger network as well as contribution between productions. And so, typically, when you're talking about production to production contribution or communication, you're talking about SRT, ZIXI, also things like RIST is another. RIST is kind of a more industrial version of SRT. And so those are there. When you talk about WHEP and QUIC, a lot of times, I mean, they can be used for delivery. A lot of times they're used for much lower latency. WHIP, I think, is not WHEP. And so those are, RTMP was something that was, it kind of was a chain reaction to things. Adobe had this RTMP, and then they built this flash media encoder to prove that it would work or to test the servers. And because that was free and it was easy to set up and go, RTMP kind of took off. And it became something that a lot of people were using for live streaming. It was just the easiest general way to get things in. HLS is better at delivery in many ways. And even when you're doing RTMP into YouTube, YouTube is delivering it back to you in HLS because HLS isn't really streaming. It's just saving segments to your drive. If you open up YouTube and you look at, if you open up YouTube and open up Stats for Nerds, you will see this surge. It'll be like, okay, I grabbed a bunch of things and then I waited. And then I grabbed a bunch of things and I waited. That's it, grabbing each segment. And if you have a really fast internet, it grabs that segment very quickly. And then it just simply plays it out. And so HLS tends to be, and again, it was free. So Apple released it to everyone long ago, 20 years ago, I think, or more. They released it to everyone to use. And so that's part of what made it possible. ZIXI is, in my opinion, the best transport to get point to point. So you could theoretically, make ZIXI a contribution to YouTube, for instance, but it would shut the whole internet down because ZIXI just basically ignores all the rules of engagement and just says, I need to get these bits from here to there, and I will do whatever it takes to do that. And if everybody used ZIXI, the internet would stop. So it's really good for us to use in production. It is more expensive. So High Vision came up with SRT, and then you have RIST, and so there are all these different ways of doing contribution. I think that in general, you can, if you back up, you're probably using ZIXI or SRT as a contribution between productions, RTMP, SRT, or HLS as a contribution, and HLS typically is the delivery, and that's the most common uses. There's obviously all these other formats that we could talk about as well, but that's a whole hour of discussion. Next question.
Next question's from Jason Robertshaw in Sarasota, Florida. Need a 1U rack mount PDU recommendation for a portable video cart powered by an EcoFlow RIVER Pro 720 watt hours. It'll run small gear, Rodecaster Duo, 15-inch monitor, Magewell Director Mini.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, here's what I have in my Gator 6U cases. This, you can see I last purchased it back in 2017 when I was building those cases. From Amazon, this is an ADJ PC 100 amp power strip single rack. It's got 8 individual outlets and on the back, each one controlled by a lighted switch on the front. So it's handy to have for that kind of stuff. You can turn on and off the stuff as you need it. Which is useful if you need to power cycle something and it doesn't have its own power, switch on it like, like ATEMs, things like that. I also bought these things, which I always have 7 different wall warts, which won't fit into that rack power distribution unit. So I stick one of these on the inside of the case and plug it into one of those outlets. And this gives me 8 more outlets, because there's 2 on each side and 4 on the top, and it has USB-C and USB-A type connectors that output 5 volts on it, so that you can even replace some of your little wall warts that have USB-C outputs on them, power supplies on them, with power coming out of this thing as well. So that's handy to have, and it's only about $13 on Amazon. And I have these all over the place, and they don't block each other with the, when you put the wall wart in. And trust me, if you think, oh, I've just got 3 or 4 things to power, an 8-outlet rack will do me fine. Believe me, you'll start putting adapter boxes in there, and each one's going to require its own little wall wart, and power supply. So plan for expansion. That's what I always say.
Next question.
This one is coming from Kent Kowalski in Madison, Ohio. I'm trying to set up a back channel in vMix using a GOXLR with Zoom. Is there a way to be able to talk with people on Zoom without going live on vMix? My plan B is just logging into Zoom on my phone and talk with my speaker before they go live.
I don't think that there's a way to talk back inside of vMix. So I think that you would need to have a separate jump in. You can do it your phone or another computer. But I think you would need to, for talkback, you would need a separate computer to do that. A lot of the ways that when we're using some of these, when we're using so far with most of the editing packages that we've incorporated Zoom into, to talk back to folks, we're not using the app itself. We're usually using something else. And it's actually one of the real powers of Zoom is that you have just a place that everyone's sitting there talking to each other, and whether it's a Viz Vector, or it is Mimo or vMix or Ecamm, they're able to join and then pull the data out of that meeting and turn it into a show. But we wouldn't use it for talkback. Next question.
Reina Doppelpopoulos in Scituate is asking, Disney Plus or Netflix? I'm more of a documentary and music fan. Which would be a better selection of that content?
Go ahead, Alex.
Well, I haven't certainly watched every single documentary that exists on either of those platforms. As someone who is a subscriber of both platforms, I find myself spending more time watching documentaries on Disney. They have a lot of fantastic, not just music documentaries, but a lot of documentaries in general. And Netflix has its own share as well. But if I had to choose only one, if it was just documentaries, I'd probably go with Disney Plus.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I haven't watched Netflix in a while because I got the Disney Plus package, and Disney was doing a combo package, which I bid on for like $30 a month. Which is no ads, Disney, Hulu, and either ESPN or Max. Is it Max? Yeah. Disney, Hulu, and Max for $30 a month. And with Disney, remember, you get the Discovery Channel, so you get lots of documentaries there. Plus, you get all the Star Wars content. You get all the all the Disney content and all the Pixar content. So that's a pretty good deal, I think.
I go, Bill.
Well, if you don't know, Netflix has a genre lookup. I didn't know this for a long time, and then I stumbled across it one day. It's at netflix.com/browse/genre/. And if you go there, you will find all of their documentary kind of hidden stuff. They have biographical documentaries, crime documentaries, foreign documentaries, historical documentaries. List goes on and on down to political, religious documentaries, science and nature documentaries. You don't normally see these because you're not trying to figure out, you're just looking through the listings and you're not going there. But they have an incredible sophisticated system. If you get into this browse function, there must be 400 or 500 different categories, foreign comedies, Latin American movies. I mean, it's just an amazing system behind the scenes, but very few people use it, I suspect. But it's one of the things I do when I'm looking for specific content. So Netflix has some serious resources there in the documentary, and I think the same thing in terms of music.
Yeah, I think if you really like there's Discovery content, obviously that's there. That is, I think Discovery is all HBO, and I think that Discovery, is HBO really mixed and matched with Disney? I mean, because you did get that bundle, Courtney. That seems like two different companies.
Yeah, they just changed it. Notes. It used to be ESPN.
But ESPN is owned by Disney, Hulu. But HBO is not. That's why I'm confused.
I know. They're grabbing other services. They just did fold Hulu in and things like this. So Disney's being pretty aggressive.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that I probably watched, other than watching movie documentaries like Industrial Light and Magic or Light and Magic and other things and behind the scenes for movies, I probably spend more time watching documentaries if I was going to bounce back and forth, probably on Netflix. And by the way, if you're looking for one to watch, Chef's Table season 1, some of season 2 is amazing. So I've definitely seen more documentaries on Netflix. And the other one that you don't see very often is there's a lot of documentaries hidden in Amazon Prime as well. So that's another one to take a look at too. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Any issues with your Mac audio or editing apps when upgrading from Ventura to Sonoma? I'm willing to drive my M1s up the 101 this weekend, but not head into the mountains and valleys of Sequoia until I get an M5.
Bill?
I haven't had any trouble so far. I know that other people, Mickey famously has difficulties navigating and having problems with the current operating systems on Mac in terms of their facility for him. But I am a pretty early upgrader. I'm on Sequoia 10.1.1, which was the latest one that came out just a couple of days ago. And everybody is thinking the 10.2 is going to be an even bigger one. But all of the things that I normally do, not just to get on the show, but the work that I do and everything else, nothing has failed for me in the longest time. You get into a little glitch occasionally when you're trying to do something very sophisticated, but usually if I use one of the tools that are already built into the operating system to back out to the last version and take a couple of days and then go back to it, things have been working for me. So that's my experience. Everybody's different. Everybody hits their system differently. So, and it's quite possible, I learned this a long time ago, to get a toxic asset in a project, no matter what the application that's running that project is, and suddenly your system grinds to a slowness that is horrible or crashes or something. But I find that seldom, not never, but seldom linked back to the actual code. No. And when Apple does have a problem, they tend to, within a day or two, fix it.
Now, Mickey's calling you to the mat there, Bill.
I know he
said, should I remind you of all the troubles that you regularly have with Sequoia? Nothing has failed. What happened multiple times last week on your system?
Mickey says it was Sequoia. And listen, Mickey is one of the smartest guys about operating systems I know, particularly in the audio realm. I don't think he's matched by anyone. But he has a very complex way to do things. My system is far more complex since Mickey got involved with it, to my benefit, because he really has me pushing the outside edges of things. And it's been very stable through his help. But I got to tell you, I spent a lot of time without doing the kind of sophisticated things I'm doing on this show now. And I was always an early upgrader, and it worked pretty stably for me. I respect his opinion. I would never cross him, and he's had difficulties fixing some of the things we've run into as we get out there on the bleeding edges. But for day-to-day computer operations, this has been amazingly solid, and I do upgrade my systems way quicker than most people, usually within a week if I'm not in a big project. I'll go to the brand new one. Like I said, I'm on 15.1.1 now. I'm waiting for 15.1.2.
Yeah, I usually wait, and my main system usually gets upgraded about when the new system is released. So this one is still on the last system, and it'll stay there for a while longer. I do experiment with other ones because I want to see whatever the new thing is, the new shiny whatever. So I have other computers that are on the newer one, but my main system that I use will wait until as much as settled as possible. And then I read a bunch of things and I look at a bunch of things, and it's very, very tentative about moving the operating systems forward because primarily audio. I go, and Alex.
I have some things to say. I'm not sure how much of an audio delay we have on the program out, but we'll have to bleep it all out because it'll be. No, I'm just kidding. For operating systems in general, I tend to stay behind as much as possible. Generally, I find with Mac OS is that it takes about a year for things to really shake out. And after about a year, you can kind of evaluate that operating system and see really where it's at, because it'll show you its true colors after about a year of patches on it. I would say if nothing is broken, don't upgrade unless there are features that you are missing. For example, if the vendors of the applications that you're using are releasing a lot of new features, but they've dropped support for Ventura and you're getting left behind, it may be time to consider upgrading. But if you can get away with it, stay on Sonoma, which is one release behind. Most of my computer, in fact, all of my computers are still on Sonoma, except for the M4, because I had no choice. I bought it and it shipped with Sequoia, and I haven't been very impressed with it. I've had a lot of weird issues with core audio on it. That's been a problem for a while. I think the last truly rock-solid operating system from Apple that I used was Snow Leopard, and that was well over a decade ago. So unless you have a reason to upgrade, I would not suggest it. But, always check with your vendors. Check the compatibility lists. Reach out to them. Make sure that they've run them through the gamut of testing. Check with all the plugins as well. That's where you get kind of caught by surprise is any third-party plugins that get run inside of a digital audio workstation or nonlinear editor, that can destabilize the system. And also, in my experience, Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve app with various Waves plugins. I mean, I have a couple hundred Waves plugins, and I've seen some weird crashes. The moment I disabled the Waves plugins, it became stable again. So that can be a problem too.
Next question.
David Brady in New York City, New York, USA. Speaking of AI, have you tried Clippy AI Assistant yet? Felix Rieseberg built it as an art project that can run real large language models on your computer, Mac, Windows, Linux.
And here it is. Here's Clippy. So you have to take a look at it. I haven't really gone. I know that from a security perspective and probably a cost perspective, I should try to run these on my computer. But I find that all the ones that I've tested so far have not been fast enough, and I'm switching between so many, and I just don't think that the LLMs that are local are as robust, and so I haven't gone down that path very far. But it's interesting. We should check it out. The link is in the question. Next question.
David Brady in New York City, New York. Google I/O announced some pretty spectacular tools for creatives. Who's looking to take the plunge into Gemini with tools like Imagen, Veo, and Flow?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I haven't waded through the entire 2.5 hour keynote yet. I looked at some highlight reels, and the stuff looked pretty amazing. However, it is kind of pricey. I went to look up the pricing on it, and here's what you get Google AI Pro, which includes a lot of these new things that they announced. Flow, which is an AI filmmaking tool, which is kind of does storyboards and things, and WHISK, which includes Veo 2, which is their text-to-video generation. All that's for about $20 a month, and it says up here, Student AI Pro is free for students through Finals 2026. So for about a year, you get free access to it, including video generation with Veo 2. And if you've seen any of the videos generated with Veo 2, you know it's pretty great. And they have now Veo 3, which is out. And if you get the Pro version, it's $124 a month for the first 3 months, and then it goes to $250 a month. So you get everything that's in AI Pro plus the Gemini app. Plus you get Flow with Veo 3 access, which doesn't come with with the Pro version alone. And you get Whisk, which has the highest limits and does image to video creation with Veo 2, Notebook LM, Gemini, Gmail, Docs, and more. Project Manager, Project Mariner. That's their agentic AI that can go out and interoperate with other programs and call people and make appointments and set up your calendar and add things and do things. You get early access to that. It has not been released yet, so you get a chance to take a preview of that. Plus, YouTube Premium comes bundled in there since you're paying $250 a month to get rid of the ads in your YouTube feed. So.
Really feel like the NFL thing should come with it as well, but for that price, the NFL ticket. I think I'm trying to avoid it. I don't know if I can. The Veo 3 examples are intense.
Amazing. It does dialogue with lip movement.
Oh, so I believe it only
sound effects.
Only if you do text prompts. So, if you do image, my understanding is if you use images as sources or video as sources, you can't get it to do the lip sync with the voice. You have to text prompt it and let it kind of build the whole thing for you.
I think that's a guardrail, which,
yeah,
broken later.
Yeah. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. But I think that if you're thinking that AI may be on that front edge. And I have to say that some of the examples that we've seen this week have been pretty insane. You know, there's a pharmaceutical ad for Pupamin, which is it's a someone who works on pharmaceutical ads made one that said, if you take this, it will attract puppies. And it says it doesn't really get rid of depression, but it's hard to be sad when you've got puppies, you know. And so they made this whole ad for Pupamin. Puppermin. And anyway, it's pretty good. And a lot of us in this show have talked in the past about the fact that pharmaceutical ads, because they're so vapid, would be the easiest ones to take over. And when I watched that, I was like, well, in 1 year, maybe less, anybody working on a pharmaceutical ad is toast, because there's no reason to have, there's no reason to have anybody there. I mean, the pharmaceuticals are going to be like, oh, let's just use that, So anyway, so I think that's going to be an interesting puzzle. For the folks for the brands that are not afraid of being sued for AI or whatever, but I think Google's probably seen as a safer place to go in that area. So it'll be interesting to see where this all goes. But I will say that I'm very tempted to get the Ultra at least for 3 months and just see if I actually use it. But I've been trying to really think about how to, like, there's some music videos and some other things that I'd like to pitch that I realized I think, with enough practice, I could probably put a demo of the entire music video together, show it to the band, and say, this is what I wanted. This is pretty close to what I want to do. and have it all look like them and be, do the whole thing and everything else. And so that they get a sense of, like, this is the framing that I'm looking for. I also think it's important as media producers for us to constantly understand how it works. Like saying that we don't want to use it, you can get run over really quickly, and so I think staying on the front edge of that is important. So we'll see. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the techniques I used that was so successful in my commercial practice was a comp and replace thing. I would use a lot of buyout photos or videos, clips and things like that. We would comp up ads so people could see what they were all about, and then we go produce them in the real world by shooting and hiring actors and the rest of that. And for that kind of workflow, which can be incredibly effective, I can't think anything more powerful and stronger than using some of these new AI tools to be able to get your ideas down, because there's a lot of people on the other side of the table who are decision makers. You can talk them till you're exhausted and they will never get a vision, but you show them the 30-second ad comped up, even if it's stick figures, and suddenly they can kind of see what you're talking about. So in that respect, it can be incredibly powerful.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, Alex, if the Puppetrin commercial came with a side effects warning that may cause yellow stains on carpet and gnarled furniture.
No one talks about it. It's funny. It was like this dog chewed up my book and pooped on my thing, but I still love it. So it talks about all the things that a puppy can do. It doesn't have to have the This is an interesting take on it. Like, this is something that kind of confused me on because I wasn't really watching. I was kind of playing with TikTok, but not like focusing on it. And there's this comedian that I think is kind of funny, and Sindhu V is the comedian. And so I was listening to it, and I was like, oh, this is really funny. And I looked down, and I said, there's something weird about her. And then I suddenly realized they had taken her original performance, built an AI version of her, and then ran it. So here's like what it looks like here. So I don't have the example.
When I found out that I was going to do this gig, I immediately put together a message and I pinged it out on our family WhatsApp group to my husband and my children.
It's kind of cutting in and out. But her hand does get a little funny when she waves it around.
She does it over and over again. So that's what I noticed was. Anyway, the repetitive nature of it was the thing that had me, like her hand just did the same thing. And some people do that. They do the same thing with their hand, but it was that. And there's something about the facial thing that doesn't quite work. And so, but then I looked at it and it declares that it's AI. It's not like it's trying to hide it. But I think that that's going to be a really interesting puzzle. I also think that there is incredible opportunities when it comes to reproducing historical events, and thinking about when you were there, or interviewing people, and for people to visualize what it was like to be back then. I think is kind of interesting as well. So I think that there's going to be a lot of things that are very useful. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of bad things too. So we just have to we'll kind of play with it. I think they are trying to put as many guardrails on it as they can. There's only so many guardrails. The guardrails are only so useful. I used to drive to. We used to go skiing at I think it was Vail. On the way to Vail or Copper Mountain, I can't remember. There's a really windy little road, and they took the guardrails off because it would force everybody to drive slower. Because it was really scary. It was really scary. And about once a year, you'd be driving up to ski, and you'd see like little tire marks going off the side. You know, you're like, well, he took that one a little too fast. And so it's I think that the guardrails also. We'll see how I think we'll see some pretty horrible things, but we're also going to see some pretty amazing things as well.
By the way, if you want to attract puppies, there's this thing called freeze-dried liver. We called it doggy crack on our PetSmart sets. They go nuts. Just to let you know.
With our cat, all we have to do is open, like if we lose the cat, all we have to do is open a tuna can. Like you pop it open, you're like, I didn't even know that the smell could get there that fast. And then they're there. They're like, hey, how's it going? What are we doing here? Yeah, next question.
This is a QR code question from Steve Holden in London, UK, trying to stream to Zoom events over RTMPS. vMix connects immediately, but Vidiu Go doesn't. Vidiu connects to YouTube RTMP, no issue. Same 1080p 30 streaming to both. What's the issue?
A Go guy.
Yeah, I was in a show earlier this week, and they were using Zoom events, and I was pretty impressed with how secure it is. You could really lock that sucker down. And one of the things that the answer is kind of in the question here is Zoom Events does use RTMPS for the input. So if you have an older Vidiu Go, up until about, out of the box, if you bought it before 2020, it just did RTMP. So you will need to firmware update that device to get it to do RTMPS. And then Zoom Events will allow an ingest of RTMPS signals. So it's kind of hit or miss whether it'll work with Zoom Events or not. But if you update the thing, you still might not have it working correctly. You might just want to update that encoder. I mean, these things are from like 2018 or something. They're pretty long in the tooth. We used one at our church. In fact, we had a couple thousand of these things at church where all the locations would just push the start. Once they were set up, you could just hit the start button and they would push out a stream. And so it was very simple for services with a volunteer to just hit that one button. And so it was a quick and easy way. But nowadays we just use Zoom and we just hook up a laptop and that's how we get our video in. But update the firmware and let us know how it goes.
Next question.
This one's for me. It rarely happens, but sometimes I get a garbled video output from one of my HDMI outputs on my ATEM Extreme that feeds a Roland UVC-02 encoder. Only solution is to power cycle. Anyone experience this?
Good, Courtney?
I don't have the UVC-02, although it does look like a neat little thing with its dock for a microphone and video inputs. So it's an all-in-one dock. Looks kind of nice. Usually when I run into a problem like this, and I recently ran into a problem with this with my Viltrox HDMI monitor and feeding it out of an output out of the ATEM. And it turned out to be the cable. Some cables worked. Some cables, it just said no signal. And it has to do with the EDID exchange when you plug an HDMI cable in. Besides power cycling it, you might try unplugging the cable and plugging it back in again. That should reinitiate the EDIC exchange. But if it doesn't, and I don't know if this little Roland, how compliant it is with all the resolutions that are available out there. Maybe the one resolution that the ATEM is outputting isn't in their list, depending upon the frame rate or whether it's interlaced or non-interlaced. Depends on what your ATEM is set to. But if it only happens intermittently, I'd say you maybe have a bad cable, bad connector, or perhaps the cable has a dicey connector that sends that EDID data.
Good, Bill.
I know there are people who leave their ATEMs on all the time and it works for them. I have never had that experience. For me, every time I leave it on overnight or for a couple of days and I come back to it, something is not working particularly well coming out of the ATEM. So I've gotten into the habit of recycling it every day and reprovisioning it, and that takes care of everything. So, Alexander, I'm not sure if that's where your problem is coming up, but that's just my ritual, is to leave it off overnight. I've got a main panel switch for it, turn it on in the morning and reprovision it, and that seems to make it much happier than leaving it on for me in my setup.
Go ahead, Alex.
You know, I used to actually, most of my gear I leave running 24/7. The ATEM, just because I'm always worried about heat with that thing, I've started up, well, last year I started just leaving it off until I actually using it. And I have a remote switch here right under my desk here. And when I hit that, it turns it on and off. So I turned it on this morning when it was completely off. And then the video output, now the multi-view is fine. Everything coming in, all the sources, camera source, fine. The problem is I went to join the meeting inside of Zoom, and that computer that is running the Roland just had a completely garbled video output. And so I turned off and on the camera. That didn't fix it. After I had power cycled the ATEM again, it fixed it. So it's really strange. It doesn't happen that often. It's not even like once a month. It seems like once every 2 to 3 months or something, I'll turn the ATEM on and then something's wrong, and then just power cycling it again fixes it. It's really strange. It kind of reminds me almost of the ATEM gray thing, where like even on a cold start you could have that problem and then just restarting it again would fix it. Very odd.
Next question.
This one is a QR code question from Paul Kovacs in Elkhart, Indiana. I have the paid MixEffect Pro app with Companion and Stream Deck. Can get all working with MixEffect Pro on an iPad, but wanting to just have all on a Mac. MixEffect Pro will work with Mac to ATEM, but cannot get Stream Deck to work with Companion. Even it says MEP is online.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there's a few hoops you really got to jump through to get all this working. It's not as easy as you would think, especially if you're not a genius when it comes to turning on all the HTTP and the OSC automations. Thankfully, Adam Tao has put up some nice videos on YouTube. It's pretty long. It's like 25 minutes long, but you do have to really catch every single step and go through it. And then you got to make sure that the automations are also enabled in the system preferences. So when you get it working, you'll see the little green lights. So you'll have to have this enable OSC server, and you'll have the IP address and the port number. And he tells you, these are the defaults, but he'll tell you and he'll remind you of what these should be set out. So there's two spots in the back end to set this stuff up. One is here, and then on the switcher itself. So you click on the switcher, and you got to slide this little slider over, and also you got to enable the macros as well. Enable super source macros, and then HTTP server, and then up here.
Yeah, Guy, we don't see it. I don't think we see the. Are you sharing?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I forgot to cut it over. Mm-hmm. So over here, let me go back then. So here in the server, you're seeing the enable OSC server and then enable HTTP server. These got to be slid over, and then their support numbers. And then after you've got the switcher set up and everything's green here, you go over here to the settings, and you got to make sure that you're, where is it? Advanced settings. No, not advanced. There's some other things that you got to turn on. I think it's here. Yeah, automations. You got to say enable OSC here and enable HTTP. So if you have those two set up, and then if you have Companion pointing at the right IP address of the machine, so make sure that in Companion you're not pointing it at the ATEM, you're pointing it at MixEffect, and then you'll get all the buttons, and you'll see all the colorful buttons will light up. You could assign them to whatever page you want, and you click one, and you should see your super sources fly around and your things cut.
Next question.
Ronny Hofsoy in Tromsø, Norway. The pretty new Uperfect Delta Mega 23.8-inch dual screen has some nice features, but it does support 25, 30, 50, 60 FPS direct out from an ATEM Constellation.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it says it supports 100 hertz. I looked at this. It's an interesting design. It's basically two hinged portable displays like you can get for about 100 and a quarter. It's kind of pricey, $650 for these dual 23-inch. It says it supports 100 hertz, but it doesn't. A lot of times these smaller displays, especially one like this that uses a single USB-C connection to power both screens, may limit your I don't know whether that's 50 hertz per screen or 100 hertz total. Sometimes they have problems with these lower, the lower frame rates, 23.98 FPS. They may not handle that. It is strange. I think this would be kind of bad for, using with Zoom, because you have to put your camera way up here on top of the top one. It has tent mode down here for doing presentations, but then they show it with this mode where it's upside down with a display on the inside. I don't know anyone who would want to use it in that particular configuration. You might have to write to them and see if it will support those rates, or buy it and try it. But it is, it's $649, reduced from $1,199 or $1,200. So $1,200 is more than I would pay for a shallow depth LCD, because they're not that great at backlighting.
If you have questions for us, it's easy. You don't even have to log in. You can go to askofficehours.global. That's just going to pop up. It's going to ask for your name, your location, your question, and you can just throw it right in there. So askofficehours.global. Ask your question, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. We put it back into voting. There's people still have to vote it up. But if it doesn't get in one day, we'll bring it in the next. Askofficehours.global. Next question.
This is a QR code question from Shima Hervé in Kigali, Rwanda. Hello, I would like to know how to control presets with Novastar H series by using Stream Deck. Thank you.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, if you have Companion running, Novastar is one of those devices that's you just type in the IP address of the Novastar, and then you slide the little green, it won't be green at first, but it will when you slide it over, and it should connect, and then you should have all the presets that you can go in if they made presets for it, but otherwise you have to know what to put in on each button and assign. But a lot of these, I haven't played with the Novastar to see if the community has populated all the information for the buttons, because sometimes it's really easy. Like you open it up and you see HDMI input 1, and you can just drag that button over and it works. But sometimes you actually have to go in and figure out what the feedbacks are, what the variables are, and then you have to custom make every single button. But that should be as easy as that. Install Companion, and then slide over the little ticker, and you're off and running.
Next question.
Another QR code question from Michael Boynott in Richmond, Virginia. Alex, recently you mentioned a base Mac Mini handling up to 16 1080p outputs. Would this be raw 3G outputs or compressed?
It actually would be it would be 3G outputs. And the reason for that is that it would actually, I think, 1.5 technically, but the 1.5G is what's going out, but it's uncompressed. It may be compressed when it got to the Mac, if you were talking about pulling it out of Zoom, but it will be uncompressed coming out of it's just baseband coming out of the deck links. And so one of the things that Zoom does very effectively with Zoom ISO, and I think part of why it's on the Mac only, is because of the ability to hand the frames without even opening them, hand them straight to the deck link. so they're, as they come out, they're just being delivered to the deck link, and that is a huge drop in resource utilization for the computer, which is why it's so efficient. I still haven't had time to test it completely with 16 channels. We did test it with a Mac Studio with 16 channels a couple years ago, and it worked great. The M4 is so much more powerful. I'm going to guess that you could probably put definitely a Mac Mini Pro, which is what was asked originally. Now you're going to have the channels to do that. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be able to work. Probably my guess is somewhere between 45-55% utilization is probably where it would sit, doing all 16 outputs. Now I wouldn't do that, by the way. I would always have overlap, so I would have the ability to do that, but I would probably stick with 8 and take advantage of the fact that it's just not pushing the computer that hard. Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin. I recently get a lot of spam calls from abroad on my cell phone. I even got caught by taking one undisclosed number, which cost me $80. Anything I can do about it other than not answering callers? I don't know.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it depends on what platform you're on. Mine, I'm on Android, and Android has a potential spam. When I get a call from a number it doesn't know, or from a spoofed, usually it can tell because it has a spoofed area code that's in my area code, and it'll say potential spam. I just don't answer it, but it tells me that, and it comes up with a red screen when I pull it up to open before I answer the call. But there's filters that you can get also on your phone to only accept calls from people in your address book and people that are known to you whose numbers are in your contacts. So you can set a filter to only allow everything else goes to voicemail and doesn't get answered. And it'll only accept calls from people in your contacts.
Go ahead, Bill.
Over the course of my career, the barrier to entry to being a spammer has gone from pretty stiff to nothing. And I say that because in the old days, we used to do a lot of work for a local Cadillac dealer, and we used to have to get the names of people who owned Buicks because that was one of the most traded in cars for Cadillacs. And I used to have to go to the state people who had the car registration things, and we had to get a big tape, and the tape had to go to somebody who could pull off those names and turn it into an actual mailing list, and then we had to print the mailers and send them out. So there's a lot of friction between getting the names of people to do cold calling like that and getting something done that would return something. Now, you got billions of names circulating out there, all of which can be sorted and filtered, and instantly you can spam 1 million people, and that's not even breaking a 10-second sweat. So you have to be very careful, and there's really nothing you can do. Once you're in one of those lists, they get cross-sold, people scrape them off the net. It's almost impossible to completely wall yourself off from this kind of chicanery, and it's going to be like that for the rest of our lives. You just have to build defenses against it and do what a lot of us do, which is just try to keep your address as close held as possible and never click on anything unless you're absolutely sure you know who it is, because once they don't even care whether you're responding or not. They just want to, we sent this out, somebody clicked. That's all I know. It's a person. I'm going to sell that name or that address to as many people as I can for as little as I can and still try to make money. It's crazy business.
Yeah, I think you're going to see more and more tools that allow you to only either see things that are coming from known entities or people who have kind of registered who would risk losing all of that if they if it's kind of a positive confirmation as opposed to proving that they're not that. So I think that that's going to be coming down the path. I know that for me, it's not just that I ignore phone calls from people who I ignore almost all phone calls. So I have during the day during the day, my work day, I have a handful of people that can call me directly. It's about 15 people that can call me directly during the day, and half of those are my family. So very few people can call me directly. I insist on meetings. Let's set up a meeting and talk about that. I don't like people calling me randomly and interrupting my thought process. And so, it comes down to not just spam or anything else. It comes down to I don't have notifications on. I don't have, I don't like things buzzing around me while I'm trying to think of hard things, And so, and I think that Christopher Nolan doesn't even have a phone. And it's actually an interview with him that kind of inspired me to start turning everything off. And he just said you can't have big thoughts when you're constantly being interrupted. I've definitely turned off almost all notifications between 6 o'clock and 9 a.m. Every day. You can't get a hold of me. Like my phone, even my family can't get a hold. You can't call me. So I turn it. Everything goes off. I go dark. And I do that because, and I cannot tell you how much of an impact it has made on my ability to synthesize complex problems. Notifications, you lost the $80, but just think about how much effectiveness you're losing by allowing your everything to constantly ping you. It's really a horrible idea, and notifications are, I don't know if they are the devil, but I'm pretty sure they were inspired by the devil to keep us from humanity from moving forward. Next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. Lao's latest software update for the MC² consoles now supports OSC. Why has it taken so long for major audio companies to add show control to their gear? And how does OSC functionality influence your choice in equipment?
I think that Mickey said that OSC is just not often used in broadcast the world, especially on the high end. GPIO and serial are kings of automation. So OSC is something that has been seen as more convenient. And what happens is as soon as you start supporting a protocol, you have to keep on supporting it. So people will have to look at it like, is this really worth doing? That's kind of and same thing with APIs. You wonder, why didn't they just write an API for us to have, be able to control their app? Well, as soon as they do that, they have to start supporting it all. So I think that's usually they have to really get a lot of pressure to add things that are going to take more work for them to constantly be updated. Because now that they have OSC, every time OSC is updated, every time something calls, now they have to have a team that's, somebody's going to have to respond to that. And so every time you add something, it's a liability to the company. It may be worth the liability, but every addition is a liability. Next question.
Jeff Vealey in Henderson, Texas. What are your favorite tie-down accessories and tips for cable management for an in-studio audio-video rack?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, for me, I learned from really expensive furniture, and in terms of cable troughs, cable runs, tie-downs, looms, all sorts of things that the real professionals build into the back of desks that really let you manage your cables much easier than it is for a standard table if you're trying to put something on there. For me, there's a couple of things that I think about. If I'm not in a permanent circumstance, one of the tools that has come up in the last 10 years or so is called command strips. They're a little really sticky thing that goes onto a surface, gives you a Velcro kind of tie down, but you can pull the tab in the back of it and it has a special way of removing the adhesive so that you can take it off. So it's a semi-permanent tie down as opposed to either something that you get stapled or tacked into a surface that's going to mar that, or the traditional Velcro sticky, which I find, particularly living in Arizona, that stickiness used to fade pretty quickly, especially if there's not an air-conditioned indoor place. But you just have to figure out the environment you're in, and then there's hundreds of different tie-down products, and a lot of them are very useful deployed to the right circumstance.
Mickey says neatly combed cables, cable lacing bars, and Velcro. And James Halding said zap strap saddle mounts. And then John Wallace said get Bixi certified cable. Get a Bixi. I think it's Bixi. Certified cabler to do it right. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, one of the things, it depends on whether you're talking about a rack where all the cables are going to be a permanent installation and never move once they're in and laced in. Then you can use cable lacing, which is a polyester lacing where you bring it around, loop it over itself and take it down, and bring it around, loop it over itself and take it down. I'm against, a lot of people use nylon tie wraps, which is a bad idea because it can harm the cable, especially any type of coaxial cable. It can change the dimensions of the dielectric inside and change the impedance of the cable if you tighten it down too much. And I used to have this pet peeve with art directors. I'd set up desks and something for a TV show, and I'd have to run all the cables from the monitors down the leg and across the floor or something. And they would come through with tie wraps and put the nylon tie wraps all over the cable. And then, of course, we'd have to, the director would come in and, yeah, can we move the monitor over to the other side of the desk? And then you have to cut all the tie wraps all down. And then I discovered this 3M product, which is really hard to find. I haven't found it anymore. This might be the same one. It was called N100, but it's Velcro. It's a polyester tape, so it's very strong, like, Kevlar type strong, with hooks on one side, loops on the other, and you just peel off, and it was fairly cheap. It's like 300 feet on a roll, and you peel it off. It sticks to itself, and so there's no adhesive anywhere. So you can use this to tie cables to legs of tables and so on, or into a rack. Just make loops of this stuff, and you can always peel it off and reattach it. It leaves no gunk on the cable. It's really handy when you got to, add a cable to a bundle of cables that's already there, or find pull the one bad cable that is turned bad out of a bundle of cables without having to cut all your all your nylon tie wraps.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What do you look for in a streaming solution? Is convenience, customization, or the ability to provide both live and on-demand viewing?
I would say that it really just depends on what the client wants for many of these things. So usually convenience is rarely something that I think that hard about. I usually think about what is the best way out of this location. And I was just talking to someone about this last week, and they had using the house internet, things went horribly wrong. And so and I was and I'm always looking for 2 ways out, 3 ways out to figure out on the largest events I have usually 4 ways out of the building, and they're all different styles. It's not 2 of the same thing. So that I figure if all 4 of them go down, no one's paying attention to my event anymore, because bad things are happening somewhere. Because they're pretty reliable, and if one dies, the other one's going to be there. So as far as live and on-demand viewing, it really depends on the client. There's a lot of solutions that allow for that. Even if you're doing something that is industrial, like Akamai or other things like that, you're going to be able to leave those segments. You can the time to life can be set up so that you're not only streaming those segments, but depositing them somewhere so that those can be made for replay. But obviously there's a lot of solutions, whether it's Vimeo or YouTube or Kaltura or many other versions of these that you can stream to and have it on demand. But it really depends on what the client wants. Some clients want to keep it there forever. A lot of clients want to take it down, re-edit it, put it back up. So it just depends on what's happening there. Next question.
This one is from Raina Doppelopoulos in Scituate. Now that things have settled down more, how do you feel about what happened with Josh Freese? Could things have, between these titans, been handled differently? What does it say about the music industry today and how it is run?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so we're talking about Josh Freese, the drummer from Foo Fighters. We don't really know internally what exactly happened there. I did some reading up on it, and I couldn't find anything solid as to the exact reason. Look, the reality is that there are most of these guys are all pros. People leave bands all the time. Sometimes it's due to differences in songwriting. Sometimes it is, most of the time they people show up professional. So people show up as professionals on time to gigs. So it's probably not that. It could be that maybe he wasn't getting enough credit for songwriting. There could be a million different reasons for that. So I don't really have any kind of inside scoops. I can't say how it would be handled differently.
Yeah, and I think that he was asked. They just told him they were moving another direction. I think that was the exact term. And so I think that he was surprised. I guess he had said he's gone through a lot of bands. That's never happened before. So he was a little taken off guard. Go ahead, Bill.
One of the most interesting things to me is occasionally on the internet you'll see contracts from like the Beatles back in the 60s, and you completely forget how much contractual stuff there were even behind the biggest names. I mean, these are incredibly valuable properties, the intellectual property, the name, the songwriting credits and everything else. And when you get that much money on the line for a famous, successful band, and you get all the rest of the who owns what and who wrote what part of what, there's just a ton of pressure there. Then you get the pressure of stardom and the huge stadium tours and living out of tour buses and on the road or on airplanes constantly. And I'm surprised that half the bands that make it as long as they do make it as long as you do, because it is a very difficult lifestyle to maintain over the course of time. It really rips lives apart. And we've seen that for all the extraordinarily talented bands that have not made it through the long run. And even the ones that have seem to have these very bad periods along the way. It's a tough business. And if you're not cut out for it. So I'm not at all surprised that there came to be a schism there. Boy, if we haven't heard anything else from all the biopics of bands like Fleetwood Mac and stuff like that about how much backstage angst there is, even among people who start out with friends. It's just a tough gig at that level. And a lot of people don't make it. And I think this is one of those things where they just got to a point where they couldn't hack being around each other anymore and had to make a change one way or another.
Yeah, it's hard. These are, I think that oftentimes having a great band is kind of lightning in a bottle. and you just have to, and the whole thing has to work. And I think that it's just a matter of, it's probably not something big like he was late all the time or he was, complaining. It probably just didn't, it just, the chemistry wasn't really there. And, Dave Grohl felt like, now other options that I was thinking about when I saw this originally was Taylor Hawkins, his son, is played with, some songs with him. I was wondering, like, do they just want to go back to, does Dave just want to give Taylor the launch? Maybe he wasn't quite ready when he plays pretty good drums. So giving Taylor's son an option to do that might be something that Dave wants to do. And that would mean nothing bad for Josh. He was just kind of the quarterback that got to play between the drafts that were available. Another one might be Nandi Bushell. I mean, she's been up there drumming with Dave Grohl. I mean, Nandi Bushell would be a great add to the Foo Fighters. So those are the two young quarterbacks that could be possible. I think the Nandi one's more fun than anything else. But Taylor Hawkins' son, I would give that a 10%, 15% chance that they just wanted to go back to him. So we'll see. Next question.
This one's for me. If your camera's output 2997 frame rates per second, but everything else in your pipeline like YouTube streaming and Zoom uses whole frame rates like 30, is there any advantage with changing the ATEM settings to 30? Does that 0.03 difference matter?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it might if you're doing double system sound and you're using time code to synchronize stuff, because integer time code, which is fairly rare in broadcast, is easier to deal with because it's whole frames, whole numbers. You don't have to deal with 0.1% slowdown of 29.97. And if your sound is coming in at a fixed frequency and you're using time code on it, make sure its time code is set to the same frame rate. Otherwise, there will be up to 3-second drift per hour, which is not good. So there's that problem. And I guess, 30 frame, if you're going to be sending out to broadcast at any point in time, you want to stay at 29.97 to interface with all the broadcast equipment because pretty much it's all in that neighborhood. So YouTube is the outlier with the 30 frames even. Usually that's only used in production, integer frame rates. And remember to do pull down, drop frame if you want to keep the time on the recorded video to be accurate with real time.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, how long are the pieces you're doing? If you're doing stuff under a couple of hours, doesn't make any difference at all. Just use whatever. And if you're going to drift that much, it's not going to make any difference in your actual stuff. If you're going 24 hours, it's going to make a significant difference. And that's why all the TV stations and broadcast facilities that run around the clock must use drop frame, because they need to keep the real time and the numbers tracking real time consistent. So they have to adjust those numbers to make it fit. But if you're doing an hour program, not going to make any difference at all.
I would highly recommend staying with drop frame in all of your video production and simply convert it on the encode, or convert it right at the very end. Everything runs better if you just use the drop frame. I know we all want to go to whole frames and we get excited about that, but don't do it. Next question.
This one's from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What large media company have you seen pivot and succeed? The LA Times may need to make a huge pivot.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I've seen almost all print publications are feeling the pain. I mean, I remember I used to not have to set an alarm in the morning because the paperboy dropping that LA Times on everyone's front porch in the morning would wake you up because it weighed about 4 pounds. Now it's like, dropping a piece of tissue paper on your doorstep. So they've lost a lot of their advertisers because there's just not as much content, and the advertisers are going to the streaming and the ability to track, because advertising the internet, they get feedback on who's watching their ads. They get demographics back. They know how many people clicked on their ads. They get direct linkage to purchasing on their ads. You see the ad in the newspaper, you got to cut out the coupon and remember to go to the store and take it with you. It's much lower friction to advertise on streaming than it is in print. And so as a result, almost all print publications, like Time magazine, is now wafer thin. and it used to be really thick.
Yeah, it only a handful of companies, publishers saw this coming and really jumped on it. I know I've talked about this in the past, but I was, in front of hundreds of publishers in 2002 and told them to use, I had a moment to say something, and I told them, you need to use your current subscriber base and move it online and figure out a way to monetize that right now, because by the time it starts to drop, it's too late. And they literally laughed at me, like all of them at once. And the only people that came over to talk to me after the event was the New York Times, and I'm not saying that I did that. It was that they were already paying attention to this process, and they were really interested in the whole thing, and they figured out a way to transition to a paid subscription much faster than almost everybody else. But other ones like the Wall Street Journal, in the CNN's trying to go down that path now. So there's a lot of different ones of moving to monetizing that, but for many of them, it's too little, too late. They just aren't getting enough. They're not getting enough revenue. They don't have enough market share to make that turn, and no one. The problem with digital is that, and this is what I found with magazines. I used to read a lot of magazines. Is that when digital, I wanted it to be on my iPad, but the formats that deliver to my iPad, I wasn't happy with. And so I just stopped reading it altogether. Like, it was a really weird thing that happened to me. I didn't go back to paper. I didn't want to look at paper. I don't like the pages anymore. But the existence of a digital version had me think, I'll just use the digital version. But I don't use the digital version because the format of the digital version is annoying. And so it's got caught between two different interfaces that I find to be a fascinating problem. And I don't know if I'm the only one, but I know that it definitely affected how I interact with magazines and so on and so forth. Thank you so much for all the great questions. We had great questions today from our producers. We really appreciate, this is a show that is completely run by you. We don't have a plan other than to answer your questions. So we're really glad that you came and answered enough questions for us to go the entire hour. If we didn't get to your question, if you put it in over the QR code, we'll bring it back in tomorrow and see if people voted up. Oh, actually Monday. We don't take drop questions over the weekend because we don't know if you're watching or not, and we don't record those. So Monday we'll bring it back in. But thank you so much for asking those questions, and keep them coming. That we've answered now, I believe, very near 60,000 questions, and we couldn't do this without you asking those 60,000 questions. And thanks to the panelists who have answered all those questions, 60,000 questions. And we really appreciate it. We've been doing this every day, and we don't know. I know that you think in the back end. In the back end, we know a lot of things. We have this village of people, that I want to thank as well, that are putting these things together. But with the panelists, we don't know who's going to show up the next day. Like, you think that there's like a scheduling process and everything else. No, we're like, oh, Bill's going to be here today, and Alex and Courtney and Harshid. Where's Harshid? Oh, he's here today. A guy is going to show up or not show up. And every day since March 25th, 2020, enough people have shown up that we could do a show. Crazy. And the other people that have shown up are the village in the back end, the people who are cutting the show, managing the show, engineering the show, figuring out what's going to happen with the show, figuring out what's going to happen with the organization to keep all the lights on. There's a huge number of people that make this possible, and we really appreciate everybody's contribution. Today, the Tlaloc Traversal, if we had done this in person, we would have traveled 43,000 miles. That's 69,000 kilometers, and that is 339 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into after hours. Millions and millions. I don't know why I said that. It's not connected to anything I was saying before. Just thought about it. Every once in a while, I think of Carl Sagan. Millions, billions,
billions,
billions, and billions. We got a new cart. I got to show it at some point. I'm so happy with my cart. Every once in a while, you're a geek when it's a folding cart. It folds up to the size of like a stroller. But it's
how wide are the tires? That's the first question.
Very wide. That was
very wide. Is it a beach cart like that?
Yes. And they're 3 inches wide.
Excellent. And hard floors, that's ideal.
Two layers. One layer flaps open where you can insert like a tent into it, and the other, and it holds 600 pounds. Wow. That's all I gotta say.
That's a lot.
And my wife was like, "What are you going to use this for?" And I'm like, "I'm going to the farmer's market with it. I'm tired of carrying all that produce around." She's like, 600 pounds, and I was like, "No, but it has a 2 layer, so it's up higher, so I don't have to lean down."
My wife and I were at Del Mar Doggy Beach last weekend. We saw somebody trying to drag their dog in a cart down to the beach, and it was only 2-inch tires. It was just so sad.
No. Like
was
first
so
thing I look
sad.
for is tires. Like how thick are how wide are those tires? And so, but when you go to the farmers, I admit that mine's not going to blend in as much as I probably should have. I should have picked something that blended in a little bit better. But and it's black, so it looks a little tactical. But because I was like, eventually I'm going to show up at and what finally broke, I was like, oh, these collapsible ones, I don't know if I want to use them. But then what happened was I saw a camera operator at the Grove when we were loading in, and he had the whole thing on this collapsible thing, and he has his camera and his live view and everything else. I was like, okay, fine, get one.
Yeah.
Anyway, then I went crazy.
Alex, if you have a chance, if you look at Gerald Undone's YouTube channel, he did a behind the scenes with Captain Disillusion, like his whole studio.
I've been meaning to look at that. I haven't watched it yet.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm sure. All right.
All right.
See you later.
See you guys. Bye.
Adios.
Adios.